This imposing work by Tretchikoff is called The Witch Doctor. It was painted in 1975 or perhaps early in 1976. It was certainly exhibited at Greenacres department store in Durban in 1976. Tretchikoff, of course, recognizable as being a painter of the exotic. He had fled the Russian Revolution in 1917, fleeing to China. He eventually, having taken jobs in marketing and advertising in the East, gets to South Africa in 1946. And throughout his career, he was, I suppose, panned. Major galleries tended to shy away from his work. But I suppose because of that, I always think of him as being the most democratic of our South African painters. Despite him perhaps not being part of the establishment, he was an artist who was visited in enormous numbers by the South African public. I mentioned this went on show at Greenacres in Durban in 1976. It was hanging for just over 5 weeks, and just over 50,000 people were recorded coming into the exhibition to see this work. That is an enormous number. There certainly aren't many artworks today in South Africa that would draw those kind of crowds over such a short period. Of course, Tretchy made an enormous fortune selling his prints. There were many British households that would have been hanging a print perhaps of the very well-known Chinese girl in the mid-century. Tretchikoff also exhibited in the 60s at Harrods in London. He was meant to take over just their gallery space, but it certainly wasn't big enough for him, and he eventually took over the whole of the lower floor, the ground floor. And in that show, he drew over 200,000 Londoners to see his pictures. So an enormously popular painter, and we are delighted to have a work that, despite being instantly recognizable, is otherwise unknown. Boris Gorelek, the great Tretchikoff scholar who has written about him so often, was wonderfully surprised to see this work. He wasn't familiar with it. It sold to the current owner's parents in 1976, and it is showing for the first time at our Johannesburg auction in June, and will be selling then on the 4th of that month.